Jazz Phantoms, Chapter 1. Sammy's trumpet cried out a melancholic tune that mingled with the smoky wisps undulating through the dimly lit jazz club. The sparse audience, scattered like lost thoughts across the worn velvet seats, clung to the edges of their glasses, rather than the notes that once held crowds spellbound. "You're killing me, Sammy," the bartender Joe shouted over the bar, his voice a mix of admiration and pity. "Why you keep playing those old tracks? It's like you want to empty the place." Sammy let the last note linger a moment longer before lowering his trumpet. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, his gaze not meeting Joe's. "Maybe I do," he murmured, almost to himself. "You talking to ghosts again?" Joe polished a glass, eyeing Sammy through the reflection in the mirror behind the bar. "Ghosts don't talk back," Sammy replied, his voice as rough as the scotch he sipped between sets. He stared at the empty stage beside him, imagining it populated by music legends and Lila, her voice a perfect complement to his trumpet. The door creaked open. A young couple stepped in, glanced around, and hesitated at the threshold. Sammy watched them, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Don't be shy, folks. The music's just about to change." The couple, uncertain, took seats at a back table near the door. Sammy stood, adjusted his jacket, and picked up his trumpet. This time, he launched into something more modern, a tune the newcomers might recognize, but his heart wasn't in it. The notes were correct, but they were strangers to him. "Sammy, you gotta let the past go," Joe called out again, his voice softer this time. The couple at the back table seemed to stiffen, their smiles uneasy. "And play what? New stuff?" Trumpet in hand, Sammy stepped off the stage after finishing the set, his tone bitter. "Music nowadays, it's got no soul." "Soul or no soul, it pays the bills," Joe retorted, nodding towards the couple who now seemed reluctantly settled. "You play what they want to hear, or this club's just a memory." Sammy sighed, his fingers caressing the trumpet's keys, each one a memory of notes played and notes forgotten. "Maybe some memories are worth keeping," he said, his eyes losing focus, as if he saw something beyond the walls of the club. "You and your bridges to nowhere," Joe scoffed. "Where's the musical tension? The transition?" His sarcasm faded under the weight of Sammy's distant gaze. "Tell me, what are you really looking for, Sam?" Sammy set his trumpet down and walked over to the bar, leaning close to Joe, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "What if I told you I could bring it all back with an esoteric bridge? And I reanimate the real music, the real stars, the nights when this place was bursting at the seams?" Joe paused, a glass halfway to the shelf. "I'd say you've had one too many of those," he nodded at Sammy's drink, "and too many nights alone with your arcane blueprints and woo-woo gadgets." "Not tonight, Joe." Sammy straightened, a fierce determination lighting his eyes. "Tonight, the past comes alive. You'll see." The skeptical bartender shook his head, turning back to his work. "Just don't lose yourself in what you can't change, Sammy. Not everyone comes back from where you're going." The trumpeter turned, facing the stage as if it were a battlefield. He picked up his instrument, feeling the cool metal under his fingers. The room quieted. The young couple paused, their drinks halfway to their lips. With a deep, steadying breath, Sammy raised the trumpet. The first note pierced the silence, clear and sharp, an invocation of the past he was about to summon. As the room filled with the pure, haunting strains of jazz, Sammy closed his eyes. In his mind's eye, he was not alone. Shadows of the greats filled the stage, their ghostly instruments playing alongside him. And there, just off to the side, he saw her, Lila. The music swelled, a bridge built note by note, between the past and the present, between loss and remembrance. Sammy played on, the club's atmosphere thick with nostalgia, each note a step on the path he was determined to walk, wherever it might lead. Chapter 2. The hiss of the radiator competed with the low hum of the city at night as Sammy shuffled into his cramped and decaying 1930s apartment, where every creak and whisper spoke of better days, long gone. The shadows seemed to sway to a silent rhythm, clinging to the edges of his cluttered living room. He dropped his keys on the small table by the door, the sound a lonely clink against the quiet. Exhausted and disheartened from another night playing to an indifferent crowd, Sammy moved through the dim light toward the corner, where his greatest secret and his deepest obsession lay hidden under a worn tarp, the Einstein-Penrose voltaic bridge. He flicked on a lamp, its glow harsh against the soft darkness of the past hour. The voltaic bridge wasn't much to look at, a complex assembly of tubes and wires, more like a mad scientist's experiment than a gateway, a portal through time. He hesitated, then, with a resolute sigh, pulled the tarp off. "Here goes nothing, or everything," he muttered to himself, fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted the settings. He wasn't just hoping to bring back the greats of jazz tonight. He was reaching back for a time when the music felt real, when Lila was still by his side. The machine hummed to life, its lights flickering like the pulse of a nervous heart. The air around him thickened, seemed to pulse with possibility. Then, with a sharp crackle that made Sammy flinch, the atmosphere split slightly, opening a door to yesterday. "Lila?" His voice was hopeful, cautious. She stepped through the portal, this version of her wearing a dress he remembered well, her smile uncertain. "Sammy? Where am I? Some kind of club?" "No, honey, not the club," Sammy started to explain, then stopped. "How did you tell a ghost they were walking in a dream?" Lila looked around, her brow furrowing. "This place, it's like stepping back in time." "That's sort of the point," Sammy admitted, watching her carefully. He'd seen different versions of Lila before. Some knew they were echoes. Others thought they were still alive, living their routine. This Lila seemed somewhere in between, aware something was off, but not quite grasping what. "You brought me here, didn't you? With that contraption?" She gestured towards the bridge, her voice a mix of awe and accusation. "Yeah, I needed to see you, to talk to you." Sammy's voice was thick with emotions long suppressed. "To talk? Or to change the past?" Lila's eyes were sharp, her presence filling the room more than the sparse furniture ever could. "It's not just about the past. It's about the music, about us, about making things right." Sammy's hands moved animatedly, his old passion reigniting with her presence. "But at what cost, Sammy? Every time you do this, what does it cost you? What does it cost us?" Her questions hung in the air, heavier than the lingering smoke of his last cigarette. Sammy sighed, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "I don't know anymore. But without you, without the music we loved, what's the point of any of this?" Lila softened, her gaze lingering on his worn face, the lines etched deep by years and regrets. "Maybe the point is to let go, to let the music evolve, to let us go." "How can I?" Sammy's voice broke. "When every note I play, every breath I take, reminds me of you?" Lila stepped closer, her hand reaching out, then fading before it could touch his cheek. "Because you have to. Because the past is a ghost, Sammy, and you can't live in a haunting forever." The machine's hum died down, and the air cleared. Lila began to fade, her form dissipating like mist at dawn. "Live, Sammy, for both of us." And then she was gone, leaving Sammy alone with his memories and the silent promise of a future where he might finally learn to live with the ghosts rather than trying to bring them back. As he covered the bridge once more, the first hints of dawn crept through the curtains, casting long shadows that looked almost like notes on a stave, waiting to be played. Chapter 3. The saxophonist's notes curled around the dimly lit apartment, blending seamlessly with the smoky air as Sammy prepared for another night's escapade. The evening's phantom guest, a sax legend resurrected from the 1920s, tuned his instrument with an ethereal grace, oblivious to the modern world's chaos that buzzed just beyond the worn-out windows. "Got enough juice in that thing to keep us swinging till dawn?" the saxophonist asked, a playful smirk bending his lips as he nodded towards the humming Einstein-Penrose Bridge. Sammy, fiddling with the dials, didn't look up. "This old gizmo's got more than enough to bring the past alive. Just wait till the bar crowd gets a load of you." The apartment was cluttered with musical scores, half-drunk cups of coffee, and vintage photographs. silent witnesses to Sammy's frantic efforts to weave the past into the present. He'd stopped explaining how the bridge worked. It was enough that it did, bringing legends to play beside him, even if just for a night. As they left for the club, the saxophonist paused at the door, glancing back at the whirring machine. "You ever worry about ripping too much from where we come?" Sammy locked the door, pocketing the keys. "Only thing I worry about is not bringing enough of it back." The club was bustling, a stark contrast to the usual sparse crowds. News had spread of the miraculous performances, ghosts of jazz playing once more. Tonight the audience was a jumble of eager faces, whispers of disbelief mingling with the clink of glasses. On stage, the air vibrated with anticipation. As the spotlight hit Sammy and his spectral band, a cheer erupted. The saxophonist kicked off the set with a soulful rendition of "Moanin'," his notes aching with a longing for the days gone by. Backstage during the break, Sammy's mood shifted as he rummaged through a box of Lila's old things. Each item a piece of the puzzle of her untimely demise. A tattered diary, a faded dress, a string of pearls. The clues never added up, each appearance revealing a different shade of her story. "You look like you're chasing ghosts, not bringing them back," remarked the drummer, a fixture from the late 30s, as he watched Sammy sift through the memorabilia. "Maybe I am," Sammy confessed, his voice low. "Every Lila that comes through tells me something new. Something about that night." The drummer shrugged, his sticks tapping against his leg. "Maybe some tunes ain't meant to be played again, Sammy. Some things, they gotta rest." But Sammy couldn't let it rest. The next set began, and with each song, he watched the crowd, the joy of the music, a sharp contrast to the turmoil within him. When a figure appeared at the bar, a Lila from a particularly tumultuous timeline, he felt his heart tighten. She caught his eye, her gaze as piercing as the first note of a solo that cuts through the night. After the set, he approached her, his steps hesitant. "Lila, do you remember anything different? Anything at all about that night?" His voice was desperate, almost lost among the chatter of the club. She looked at him, sadness weaving through her features. "Every time I think about it, something changes. It's like jazz, Sammy. It morphs. Maybe that's the point. We're not meant to play it the same way twice." Sammy nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He walked her out, the city's chilly breeze a stark reminder of the passing time. As they stood outside, the early morning emptiness enveloping them, he realized that no matter how many Lilas he spoke to, the truth was as elusive as the fading notes of a song long ended. "Maybe you're right," he conceded, watching her fade away into the dawn light, a ghost of a ghost. "Maybe some things are better left unsung." Back inside, the club was winding down, the last few patrons lingering over their drinks, reluctant to step back into a world devoid of legends. Sammy packed up his trumpet, the case clicking shut like the final chord of a set. The night a symphony of moments, forever unresolved, endlessly haunting. Chapter 4. Sammy's trumpet hung by his side as he stepped into the cool night air of the city. Streetlights cast long shadows over the bustling sidewalks, the city alive with the sound of late-night revelers and the distant hum of jazz spilling from open club doors. Tonight, he wasn't just Sammy Davies, jazz musician. He was Sammy Davies, the man who bent time, bringing the legends back to life. He walked past the marquees of the Velvet Note, the club where he was booked for the night. A line curled around the block, people buzzing with anticipation, whispers of the night's lineup spreading like wildfire. "Hey, Sammy!" a voice called out from the queue. A young man with eager eyes stepped forward, holding out a worn vinyl. "Could you sign this? They say you're bringing Miles back tonight." Sammy took the record, his hand hesitating for a moment. "Miles, huh?" he said, signing with a flourish. "Well, you just keep your ears open, kid. Jazz is full of surprises." Inside, the club was a capsule of another era. The stage was set, the microphones standing like sentinels waiting for the legends to take their places. Sammy's heart raced as he approached the bandstand. The Gateway Bridge had been set up discreetly backstage, its presence unknown to the audience, but palpable to him. As the lights dimmed, Sammy took his place, the familiar weight of his trumpet reassuring in his hands. The crowd fell silent with anticipation, then erupted as the first notes of So what? Filled the room, the musicians taking their cues from an unseen force. After the set, Sammy retreated to the bar, the cheers still echoing in his ears. A fellow musician, Tom, sidled up to him, a look of concern creasing his brow. Sammy, this is wild, man, but don't you think it's getting a bit out there? I mean, Ella last week, Miles tonight. What's going on? Sammy sipped his drink, the ice clinking softly. It's jazz, Tom. It's supposed to push boundaries, right? Yeah, but man, aren't you afraid of messing with something bigger here? Tom glanced around nervously. It's like we're playing with the fabric of reality itself. Sammy looked back at the stage, where the last notes still lingered in the air. Maybe we are, he admitted, his voice a whisper lost in the clamor of the club. The night grew deeper, and the performances blurred into a whirlwind of melodies and faces. Backstage, Sammy confronted the bridge, its lights blinking steadily. Each flicker seemed to mock his growing doubts. He had started to notice the cracks in the timeline. Songs played before they were written, musicians discussing events not yet happened. The world outside the club had begun to shift subtly, history rewriting itself with every note played under the influence of the esoteric, voltaic bridge. Sammy! The shout snapped him out of his reverie. It was Lila, another version of her, standing by the door, her expression one of mixed wonder and horror. What are you doing to us? Her words struck him harder than any music could. I'm trying to make things right, he stammered. By changing the past? Lila stepped closer, her eyes searching his. You can't control history like you control a song, Sammy. There are consequences. Sammy felt the weight of her gaze, the burden of his actions heavier than ever. I know, he said softly, turning away from her, back to the voltaic bridge. I know. As the night wore on, the club slowly emptied, the energy of the performances dissipating into the early morning haze. Sammy remained, staring at the bridge, its hum now a dissonant chord that no longer sounded quite right. With the dawn creeping through the windows, Sammy made a decision. He would play one last set, one last attempt to set things right, or at least not make them any worse. He picked up his trumpet, the metal cool and familiar against his lips, and stepped out into the empty club. The first rays of sunlight streamed in, casting long shadows across the stage. The notes he played a prayer for redemption, a plea for forgiveness, lost in the echoes of the morning. Chapter 5. The regulars drifted into the downtown jazz clubs and popular lounges as the evening turned into night. This night, Sammy stepped into a dimly lit alley where the air felt thick with the remnants of rain and rhythm. He had arranged to meet Lila there, away from the curious eyes and whispering crowds of any club. The street lamp cast long shadows, and there she was, leaning against the brick wall, her features sharp under the harsh light. You sure picked a spot, Sammy, Lila said, her voice carrying a chill that wasn't from the cool night air. I needed to talk where we won't be overheard, Sammy replied, his voice tense as he approached her. You mean about your mystical bridge? About what you've been doing with time? Her eyes were fixed on him, a knowing look that made Sammy's stomach tighten. Yes, about the bridge, he admitted, stopping a few feet away from her. But there's more. It's about you, Lila. I need to know what really happened to you. Lila pushed off from the wall, her movements graceful yet ominous. Sammy, what you're doing, pulling people out of time, playing with history. It's dangerous. I know it's dangerous, Sammy interrupted, his desperation clear. But if there's a chance I can fix things... Fix things? Lila taunted. Or fix me? You think you can just tweak the past like tuning a trumpet? It's not like that, Sammy defended, his voice rising. I've seen things, versions of events. If I can just find the right moment, the right change. And you think I know which moment that is? Lila stepped closer, her gaze intense. What if I told you that your tampering is what ends me? Every time you pull me here, you risk changing something else, something vital. Sammy's heart pounded. Are you saying it's my fault, that I caused... Maybe not directly, Sammy, but every change has a ripple in time. You've seen it, haven't you? The inconsistencies? The anachronisms? He swallowed hard, the impact of her words hitting him like a stray note in a silent break. Yes, I've noticed, but I thought I could control it, manage it. Jazz isn't about control, Sammy. It's about expression, improvisation. Life, like jazz, isn't meant to be controlled, Lila explained, her voice softening. You can't compose every one of life's details without losing the soul of the piece. But I can't just do nothing, Sammy protested, his voice thick with emotion, knowing I might save you, or might have saved you. Lila reached out, her hand almost touching his before she pulled back. And what about the cost? To the fabric of time? To us? Sammy looked down, unable to meet her eyes. The weight of his actions, the potential consequences, were suffocating. I didn't realize. I just wanted more time, more music, more you. Lila sighed, her expression one of resignation mixed with affection. I know, Sammy, but some solos are meant to end. Not all tunes can be replayed. The silence that fell between them was heavy, filled with the unsaid and the unchangeable. Finally, Sammy nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the chaos he had courted in the name of love and nostalgia. Maybe it's time to let the music play as it's meant to, he murmured. Lila nodded, giving him a sad smile as she began to fade, the edges of her form blurring with the shadows around them. Maybe so, Sammy. Maybe so. As she disappeared, Sammy stood alone under the flickering street lamp, the soft sounds of the city whispering around him. He turned his steps back toward the club, the burden of his decisions weighing on him, each step a reluctant beat in the late-night symphony of his life. Chapter 6. As the city night unfurled around him, Sammy walked alone, the rhythm of his footsteps out of sync with the distant blare of sirens and the occasional jazz riff spilling from late-night bars. The wind was his only companion, swirling through the empty streets, whispering secrets only he could hear. Another night, another show, Sammy muttered to himself, his breath a cloud in the chill air. The streetlights cast long shadows, turning each alley into a dark mouth that seemed to echo with the ghostly sounds of trumpets and saxophones. He reached the corner where the club marquee flickered uncertainly, like the beat of a nervous heart. Stepping inside, he felt the shift, a palpable change in the air as if the very atmosphere bristled with the tension of his recent tamperings with time. Sammy, you're pushing it too hard, man, the club owner, Phil, approached him, concern etching his rugged face. The guys are talking. They say things. They say they're seeing things that don't make sense. Sammy shrugged off his coat, his gaze steady. They're musicians, Phil. We all see things differently. But not like this. Phil's voice was low, insistent. Not history rewriting itself in the middle of a set. You've got to stop whatever it is you're doing. It's the music, Sammy replied, the lie smooth and practiced. Is only the music. Jazz changes things. You know that. Phil shook his head, unconvinced. Not like this, Sammy. Not this way. Leaving Phil in the dim light of the corridor, Sammy stepped into the backstage area, where the air vibrated with the tension of upcoming performances and whispered doubts. He could feel the eyes of his fellow musicians on him, their suspicion a tangible thing. He set up his trumpet, the metal cold under his fingers. As he played, the notes were more than music. They were an invocation, a desperate plea for understanding from the chaos he had unleashed. The wind seemed to follow him even here, slipping through the cracks in the doors, rustling the sheet music on the stands, as if it sought to disrupt the very notes they played. Sammy, what's happening to us? A woman's voice broke through his solo. It was Marlene, a talented club singer. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. He lowered his trumpet, meeting her gaze. What do you mean? People are talking, Sammy. They say the past is bleeding into the present. They say you're in the middle of it all. Her voice was a mix of fear and accusation. Sammy felt the weight of her words, the isolation wrapping around him like a shroud. I'm trying to fix things, Marlene. I'm trying to bring back what was lost. But what are we losing in return? She turned away, her question hanging in the air like a dissonant chord. As the set ended, Sammy packed up his trumpet, the club's raucous applause for the night's performance ringing hollow in his ears. He stepped outside, the wind greeting him like an old friend, cold and relentless. Walking back through the city, the streets empty and echoing, he pondered Marlene's words. With each step, the wind grew stronger, as if urging him on, its whispers more urgent. "You can't go back, Sammy. You can only go forward," the wind seemed to say, its voice a rustling through the fallen leaves. Sammy stopped, looking up at the dark sky. The stars were hidden behind clouds, the moon a faint outline, its light struggling to break through. He felt the truth in the wind's words, the inevitability of time's march. As he turned towards home, his heart heavy, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint sounds of a trumpet, a mournful echo of days gone by, reminding him that some melodies, once played, are never truly silent. They linger in the air, in the wind, in the heart, forever a part of the city's soul. Chapter 7. The night air was thick with the remnants of a rainstorm, and the wet asphalt reflected the neon lights of the jazz club signs. Sammy stood outside his latest venue, the smoke from his cigarette mingling with the steam rising from the sewers. The city was alive with the beats of late-night jazz, but inside him, there was only a cacophony of desperation and confusion. As the clock struck midnight, Sammy flicked his cigarette away and headed back inside. The club was buzzing with the after-show crowd, the air still vibrating with the last set's crescendo. He maneuvered through the revelers and made his way to the back, where his makeshift bridge, a portal to the unknown, was hidden behind a curtain, its presence unbeknownst to the drunken audience. Sammy stood before the device, its surfaces cold and indifferent. "Tonight, it's just you and me," he whispered, his voice steady but his hands shaking. He adjusted the dials, the familiar hum beginning to fill the room, drowning out the distant laughter and clinking glasses. "Going somewhere, Sammy?" The voice was low, like a moan, and tinged with sadness. He turned to see Lila standing there, another version brought forth by the bridge, her eyes deep pools of knowing. "I have to fix this, Lila. I can't keep watching you die." Lila stepped closer, her presence commanding and steady. "And what if you can't change what happened? What if you're meant to live with it?" "I can't accept that," Sammy replied, his jaw set. "Not when there's a chance I could save you." Lila reached out, her hand cold as it brushed against his. "Sammy, you might not like what you find. Going back, it could change you too." "I have to try," he said, pulling away gently. "It's the only way I'll ever find peace." Lila nodded slowly, her figure starting to fade as the bridge's energy increased. "Be careful, Sammy. Some shadows are darker than they appear." With a deep breath, Sammy stepped through the portal, the world bending around him in a whirl of colors and sounds, until he landed on a familiar street, the scene hauntingly set like a stage waiting for its tragedy to unfold. It was the night of Lila's death, the air crisp, and the moon casting long shadows on the ground. He hid behind a car, watching as Lila and the younger, more headstrong version of himself walked down the street with eyes downcast. Sammy tried to understand. "Why do I appear so stormy and tense? We were just out for some fun, right?" Sammy followed them at a distance, his heart pounding as he approached the moment that would change everything. He saw the shadowy figure in the alley ahead, the cause of Lila's untimely death. His muscles tensed as he prepared to intervene, to rewrite their history. As he stepped forward, the scene shifted, the way a note changes in a jazz solo, unexpected, yet inevitably right. The shadowy figure had evaporated. Sammy watched in horror as his younger self pulled Lila into the alley, an argument breaking out between them, voices rising in anger and fear. The realization hit Sammy like a dissonant chord. It wasn't a shadowy assailant who had ended Lila's life. It was him, in a moment of rage, a moment he had blocked out or forgotten. He staggered back, the world spinning around him as the bridge pulled him back through the portal and into the present. He emerged gasping for air, the truth settling around him like a shroud. Back in the club, the revelry continued, oblivious to the man who had just shattered his own past. Sammy leaned against the wall, the weight of his discovery bending him nearly to the floor. As the first light of dawn crept through the dirty windows, Sammy remained still, a solitary figure amidst the remnants of the night's chaos. His journey through time had not brought the redemption he sought, but a painful truth that he would now have to live with. The music inside the club played on, a bitter reminder that in jazz, as in life, some things can't be rewritten, only endured. Chapter 8. The hum of the city melded with the distant thrum of jazz as Sammy stood once again before the gateway to his past. Lights in the bridge flickered like the erratic beat of a scared heart. He took a deep breath and adjusted the dials, setting his coordinates for that fateful night, the night Lila died. This was his second journey through the bridge in a single night. The first trip still gripped his soul with deep regret, and he was determined to set things right. He had to untangle the knot of time he had tightened with his first intervention. As the familiar whirl of time travel enveloped him, he steeled himself for what was to come. The city of the past materialized around him, draped in the shadows of the evening. The air was cooler, tinged with the anticipation of the night's possibilities. Sammy slipped into the familiar streets, his steps quick but cautious. He knew the path well, the same path he and Lila had walked on the night she died. As he approached the critical moment, his heart pounded against his ribs like a drum solo, offbeat and frantic. Peering around the corner, he saw them, his past self and Lila, young and vibrant, laughing under the street lamps. The sight twisted his gut. He knew what was coming, and this time he was determined to prevent it. He moved forward, stepping into the light, his presence startling the younger Sammy and Lila. "What the?" the younger Sammy stammered, stepping in front of Lila protectively. "Listen to me," Sammy pleaded, his voice urgent. "You need to go home, Lila. Now. It's not safe." Lila's eyes widened, her confusion palpable. "Sammy, who is this guy?" His younger self looked between Lila and him, suspicion darkening his features. "I don't know, but he's crazy. Let's get out of here." "No, you don't understand." Sammy reached out, his hand grasping the air as they backed away. "Something bad is going to happen tonight." But his words only fueled their fear. Panicked, the younger Sammy pulled Lila away, choosing a different route, one Sammy hadn't anticipated. His heart sank as he realized his interference had altered their path. Confused and indecisive, he followed at a distance, watching helplessly as his younger self and Lila argued about the strange encounter. The tension between them escalated, fueled by confusion and fear. They turned into an alley, a shortcut Sammy had forgotten about, and his dread deepened. As he entered the alley behind them, a shout split the air. There was a scuffle, shadows against the brick wall, and then a scream that curdled Sammy's blood. Lila lay on the ground, motionless, while his younger self stood frozen in shock. Sammy rushed forward, his earlier resolve shattered by the horrific unfolding of events. His arrival on the scene, his attempt to change fate, had only led to this: Lila's death, precipitated by confusion and fear, by his own hands in a way he had never imagined. The realization was a gut punch. He sank to his knees beside Lila, the past and present blurring in his tear-filled eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice a broken note in the quiet alley. "I'm so sorry, Lila." His younger self, now realizing the enormity of the situation, fled in a panic, leaving Sammy alone with Lila in the echoing silence of the alley. The bridge's call hummed in the background, a siren song to return. But Sammy knew he couldn't go back. Not to the present, not to any moment but this one. Here, with Lila, in the city that buzzed with life and jazz and possibilities now forever out of reach. He stayed by her side, the night growing cold around them, the distant sounds of jazz, a melancholy soundtrack to his vigil. As dawn approached, the first hints of light touched the alley. The new day oblivious to the tragedy it followed, Sammy remained, a figure frozen in time, caught in the loop of his own making, his heart beating a slow, sorrowful rhythm. Chapter 9. In the dimly lit confines of the jazz club, a club where his younger self never took the stage or played a set, Sammy leaned against the bar. The soft clink of ice in his glass melded with the somber tones of a blues scale drifting from the stage. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of smoke and the bitter tang of spilled whiskey. A young saxophonist caught his eye, his fingers sliding over the keys with a desperate kind of grace. Sammy could feel the crowd's emotions ebbing and flowing with the music, a shared pulse that he once influenced and now merely observed. "You new around here?" The bartender's voice cut through his reverie, an indifferent tone masking a curious glance. Sammy turned, his eyes reflecting the weary knowledge of a time prisoner. "Been around here a time or two," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, drowned out by a particularly soulful note from the sax. The bartender nodded, used to the cryptic wanderers who drifted through the club. "You play?" he asked, nodding towards Sammy's hands, which unconsciously mimicked the movements of the saxophonist. "Used to," Sammy said, his gaze drifting back to the stage. "Used to play my trumpet in this club." On stage, the set transitioned into a piece Sammy recognized, a piece he had played in another life, another time. His fingers itched to join in, to blend his trumpet's voice with the melancholic wail of the sax. The time was right for this ghostly specter to make some music like old times. Sammy and his trumpet joined the other musicians as they took their audience on a mournful journey through the depths of the blues. After the set, Sammy returned to a curious bartender for another drink. "I can say for sure you have passion for the trumpet," the bartender quipped. "Why'd you ever stop?" "Music. It takes you places, and sometimes it keeps you there," Sammy murmured, his thoughts wandering to his inexplicable blueprint, the bridge, to Lila, to the countless times he had tried to alter a past that refused to be changed. A new figure approached the bar, her presence commanding attention. She was a singer known for turning jazz standards into soul-stirring experiences. Recognizing Sammy, she offered a small, knowing smile. "Ever think about picking it up again? The trumpet?" she asked in a pleasant voice. Eyeballing the musicians as they prepared for their next set, Sammy shook his head and replied, "Music comes from heart." The woman responded with, "So play from your heart. Is that so hard for a specter as yourself?" "It's not possible," Sammy stated, and paused to align his thoughts. He had to say it aloud to a real person. He had to confess, "Music comes from heart, and my heart is dead." The woman singer could see Sammy's pain and knew there had to be more to his story. She waited. Sammy sipped his drink before continuing. "Long ago I believed I could manipulate time and I could move heaven and earth. I made many reckless attempts, but could do neither, and I paid the price. As a result, time turned my heart to stone and took away my music." Emotionally drained and purged, Sammy concluded, "So I'm here to listen." She nodded, understanding more than she let on. "Listening's good. Teaches you things playing can't." "Yeah," Sammy agreed. "Teaches you plenty." The night wore on, the music weaving its way through the club like smoke, touching everyone differently. Sammy felt it as a balm and a bind, tying him to moments he had lived and lost, to people who flowed in and out of the club like notes in a forgotten melody. As the last set ended and the patrons began to drift away, the saxophonist came to the bar, ordering a drink before noticing Sammy. "Hey, I feel like I've seen you before. You play?" Sammy considered the question, his history with the instrument a heavy weight. "I used to believe that I could play and play damn good," he finally replied. "But now, I'm happy to take time and just listen. You should try it. Just listen." The saxophonist laughed, thinking it a joke. "Listen, huh? When does a struggling musician have time to sit and just listen?" "Good luck, son," Sammy said, a knowing smile flickering across his face. He looked around the club, at the lingering few who sought to drown their sorrows or raise their spirits. He watched the cycle of life and music spin around him, a cycle he was no longer truly a part of. He left the club as the first hints of dawn crept across the sky, the music from within fading into the morning air. Outside, the city was quiet, resting before the start of a new day. Sammy walked the empty streets, his presence less a part of the world than an echo in the breeze, a melody remembered by those who had once known him, felt by those who unknowingly followed the phantom trails he left behind in the jazz and the blues. Chapter 10. In the dim, smoky ambiance of an uptown jazz club, the older and more perceptive Sammy Davies leaned against the dark mahogany of the bar, his eyes locked on the stage. There, his younger self, full of hope and yet unaware of the spiraling future, blew his trumpet with a fervor that had once been his signature. The music swelled, filled the room with a vibrant energy that contrasted sharply with the somber understanding in the older Sammy's gaze. "You come here often?" the bartender asked, polishing a glass with a rag, his eyes flicking curiously towards Sammy's brooding figure. "Occasionally, just to let the music reach my heart," Sammy murmured, his voice low, almost blending into the jazz notes that floated through the air. "Feels like a good night to listen." The bartender nodded, setting the glass down and reaching for another. "Funny how this place doesn't change. Draws the same souls back, night after night searching for something." On stage, the younger Sammy hit a particularly high note, the sound piercing through the murmur of the crowd. The older Sammy flinched slightly, the note echoing a myriad of his past choices, each one leading him back to this side of the bridge. A woman at the bar, her dress a shimmering silver that caught the dim light, turned to regard him. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice light but not without sympathy. "Or maybe I heard a ghost," Sammy replied, his gaze drifting back to the stage. "At any rate," Sammy continued, "every night I'll listen for special notes that can restore my heart." "Well, those must be some special notes," she laughed, a clear, ringing sound. "This city, huh? Full of ghosts and jazz notes." "Yeah, and both will haunt you if you let them," Sammy said, his eyes not leaving his younger self. "Make you do things. Make you try to change things that maybe should just be left alone." The woman followed his gaze to the stage, then back to his aged, lined face. "Regrets?" she ventured. Sammy shook his head slowly. "More like revelations. You play with time, it plays back, turning you to stone." The younger Sammy finished his set, and the crowd erupted in applause. He bowed, his face alight with the naive thrill of the performance. As he left the stage, the older Sammy felt the weight of his years, the depth of his journey pressing down upon him. "Will I see you here again?" the woman asked as she prepared to leave, her question hanging in the air like a note held too long. Sammy gave her a small, resigned smile. "I'm always here listening, one way or another." She nodded, seemingly understanding, and left him with his reflections. The older Sammy watched as his younger self mingled in the crowd, the easy laughter and youthful energy so at odds with his own weary solitude. It was a sharp, painful contrast to his current understanding of how every indulgent moment on that stage had its price, how every note played was a step on a path that led inevitably here. The club began to empty, the patrons drifting out into the night, leaving Sammy listening to the quiet aftermath. He remained at the bar, the last to leave, the first to arrive. The listening cycle was his new existence and his eternal journey. Always listening with his heart for the perfect note, played in perfect time with every other musician. Some thought old Sammy to be insane, while others asked to hear how jazz music is so mesmerizing, so magical. Finally he stood, his movement slow, deliberate. As he walked out, the first light of dawn was breaking across the city, the streets quiet and expectant. Sammy paused at the door, looking back one last time at the empty stage, the lingering echoes of notes fading into silence. He stepped out into the new day, the city awakening around him, and walked away from the club, his figure gradually merging into the morning mist. The club, a beacon of jazz and memories, stood timeless, ready to welcome the next musician who might think they could outrun their fate.